It's different from anything you've played before. It's unique, unifying, maybe even utopian. So today, welcome to the world of Wii U.
Nintendo had enjoyed staggering success with the Wii. Its relatively low cost, its unconventional yet accessible motion controls, and its family-friendly game library made it a crossover hit with households around the world. I mean, seriously, everyone had one of these. It'd be quicker to name the people that didn't. But despite, or perhaps partly because of its ubiquity, the Wii was not seen as a serious game console. There's a lot of fondness for it today, but at the time, it was a bit of a joke.
The name of the toy says it all. Wii! Wii!
Come on now. Wii? Come on, that little controller, baby, that looks like a dildo.
At a time when dark and gritty war simulators were dominating the gaming industry, the Wii felt more like a toy. Your parents and your younger siblings might have loved gathering around to waggle their Wiimotes together, but everyone knew the real games were on Xbox and PlayStation. Sure, towards the end you could get games like Black Ops on the Wii, if you didn't mind also getting bullied at school. Despite what was undoubtedly a financial success for Nintendo, this perception really seemed to bother them. They made it clear that their goals for the next generation console would not just be to evolve the Wii, but to win back the credibility of gamers. And perhaps the clearest example of this motivation was the name itself. It wasn't just we, as in you and your family anymore, it was also you, the hardcore gamer looking for a more mature experience. I can see the logic, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't sound dumb. Let's be honest here, Wii U is an awkward name, and it caused a perpetual marketing problem that plagued it from day one. Hardcore gamers just couldn't take the Wii brand seriously. Compared to its peers, it still looked and sounded like a toy for kids. And casual observers often assumed the Wii U was just a minor enhancement, and to be honest, it kinda was. In many ways, the Wii U was just more of the same in HD. But all of this was really only the tip of the iceberg. The world of casual games had forever changed with the iPhone and iPad. No matter what Nintendo did, this was fierce competition that made it virtually impossible to capture the same lightning in a bottle. Additionally, Nintendo's policy of not selling hardware at a loss meant it was severely underpowered compared to its peers, and in some ways, even its predecessors. Developers struggled getting the latest games running well on it, which was true for the Wii too, but while the Wii had a huge install base to justify the effort, the Wii U just didn't. As a result, many high-profile games that were announced ended up getting cancelled, which just made the situation even worse. To be fair, there were some attempts to innovate, most notably with the Gamepad, a large tablet-esque controller complete with a touchscreen. Initially, this even seemed like a promising idea, echoing the much-beloved Dreamcast VMU and Nintendo's own DS. But perplexingly, games rarely managed to find a good use for it. For every Super Mario Maker, there are 100 games that did nothing but duplicate the game screen. Occasionally useful, maybe, but hardly the kind of feature that sells millions of units. It's all worth it just for the giant horn button you can slap in Mario Kart 8. Ultimately, the Wii U just never got that killer app that took full advantage of the hardware and made the whole thing make sense. But like any underdog, the Wii U has gained a pretty strong cult following. For years, modders have worked tirelessly to expand the Wii U's capabilities and unleash its true potential. From emulators to homebrew to genuine quality of life improvements, the Wii U is one of the best modded systems to own today. With one console, you can theoretically play nearly the entire Nintendo back catalog through a combination of backwards compatibility, translation layers, and emulation. It's been amazing to see this renaissance take place. But there's an elephant in the room threatening the Wii U's longevity. Its greatest strength is also its Achilles heel. The Gamepad. I have a real love-hate relationship with this thing. On the one hand, it's a great controller. It's comfortable and pretty cool having a screen in your hands, even if they've never quite figured out what to do with it. And these joysticks, way better than those gumdrops you get on the Switch. At the same time, the Gamepad had a strange relationship with the Wii U. You expect it to work like a regular controller, but it's actually more like an extension of the console itself. Let me explain. The Wii U supported a decent variety of controllers, primarily the same controllers as the Wii, but it had a few of its own too. However, it only ever supported a single gamepad at a time. I always thought this was kind of weird, like only one player gets to play with the cool screen? But then the rabbit hole gets deeper. You realize even if you aren't planning on using it, the gamepad turns on anyway. And while it's possible to do basic things with other controllers, many parts of the system and many games flat out require the gamepad and refuse to work with anything else. So what do you do if you lose or break it? just buy a new one, right? Nope. The gamepad was never sold in stores as a separate accessory. You got the one that came with your system, and that was it. The only official way to replace it was to file a formal repair request with Nintendo and hope they would be relatively merciful. And over 10 years later, well, good luck with that. That effectively means there's no way to get a new gamepad today. God forbid your younger brother accidentally steps on it, or your dog pisses on it, or your parents pack it away and lose it, not realizing they're supposed to be together. Apparently they did briefly sell replacement gamepads in Japan, but guess what? The gamepads are region locked, so even if you imported one of those, you're not allowed to use it. Okay, but that's official gamepads. Surely there are some less good, but acceptable clones out there that can at least keep your Wii U working, right? Right? Well, it turns out, whether the gamepad is too niche or too complicated, no one has ever managed to produce a viable reproduction of this critical part of the Wii U. The only way today to acquire a replacement gamepad, should you ever need it, is to swipe one from another Wii U, which will obviously just make that one useless instead. This is why a second-hand gamepad costs about the same as a whole Wii U, because you can't really have one without the other. For every gamepad that dies, a console dies along with it. I worry about the Wii U. As much as one can worry about a failed video game console. I just can't help but wonder how many will effectively become paperweights solely because they don't have a gamepad anymore. So what can we do about it? The Wii U gamepad is complicated. It's a long way from a D-pad and a set of buttons. Just looking at the feature set, you can tell there's a lot of technology in here. Besides being a regular controller, it also has a touchscreen, a webcam, speakers, a microphone, an accelerometer, a gyroscope, a magnetometer, a rechargeable battery, an NFC reader, an infrared emitter to emulate a TV remote. And if that's not enough, it even has an expansion port to add further functionality, which ultimately never ended up getting used. And to drive it all, it has not one, not two, but 3 CPUs in it, plus a couple megabytes of RAM and flash storage. There's enough in it to be a computer. It is a computer. A computer that somehow no one has ever ported Doom to. Now that I've mentioned it, let me know when you get it done. But even if the gamepad is complicated, we live in a world where we're surrounded by small computers 24/7. Chances are you walk around with one every day that's 10 times as powerful as the Wii U gamepad ever was. So what's stopping us from, as the kids would say, making an app? Well, here's the big problem. The Wii U and gamepad communicate to each other using a modified version of 802.11n. Don't recognize it? Well, you'll probably know it by its more popular name, Wi-Fi. That's right, the gamepad and console connect with what can largely be described as 5 GHz Wi-Fi. It has to be 5 GHz. The console is the router and the gamepad is its sole connected device. It has an SSID, it has a password, it gives the gamepad an IP address. It really is all just standard networking wrapped up into a fancy looking package. But there's a catch. Using off-the-shelf Wi-Fi standards almost certainly saved a lot of time and money, but Nintendo knew that allowing any Wi-Fi devices to partake in this connection would threaten their precious walled garden. So to prevent that, they made what I can only describe as a minor obfuscation to the Wi-Fi standard. And it's impossible to explain without first explaining how Wi-Fi security works normally, so bear with me. You might think when you authenticate with a router that you send over the Wi-Fi password, it checks if it's right, and if so, it lets you connect. But in reality, that wouldn't work at all. Anything sent over the air can be heard by anyone else in the area. It's like shouting in a public place and expecting only one person to hear it. When they were first designing Wi-Fi, they realized rather than send the password anywhere, they could just use it as an encryption key. Then the only way they can even understand each other is to already know what the password is. Seems pretty secure, right? Traffic's encrypted and no one can snatch the password straight out of the air. Well, that's what they thought too, but it turns out you're both wrong. This was called WEP for Wired Equivalent Privacy, an ambitious name considering it was full of security flaws. Some of them weren't entirely their fault. For example, the US at the time had strict regulations around the export of encryption technology, so early manufacturers deliberately crippled their encryption so they could sell their products worldwide. But even when that regulation was lifted, WEP as a whole was flawed from the beginning. Some of them are obvious. I mean, if everyone's using the same encryption key, then everyone with the password can read each other's messages. On your home Wi-Fi, that's probably fine, but in public, kind of a problem. But the real killing blow was that WEP had fatal design flaws, and hackers found ways to recover the Wi-Fi password in a matter of minutes. In response, the Wi-Fi Alliance, yes, their real name, introduced WPA, which solved all of the major design flaws. Once again, they do not share the password with each other, but they also don't use it directly for encryption. But they do send two completely random numbers. Each of them then throws those numbers, along with a few other details, including the Wi-Fi password, into a hash function. And that hash, known as the pairwise transient key, is then what's used for encryption. Once again, no password has been transferred, but they can only talk to each other if they had the same one. Crucially, every connected device has a different PTK. In fact, a new PTK with new random numbers is made every single time a device connects. So even if someone did manage to brute force one PTK, which is a lot harder anyway due to other security improvements, it'll almost certainly have been cycled out long before they actually do. And all those random numbers make it extremely difficult to brute force the original password back from a PTK. The improvements in WPA paid off to the point that pretty much all Wi-Fi networks are still using it today, including the Wii U and its Gamepad. The Gamepad connection follows WPA2 almost to a T, except as soon as it's done generating the PTK, sneaky, you see that? The 3 bytes at the start of the PTK were rotated to the end. This is the entire reason only gamepads can connect to the Wii U. Okay, so you're probably thinking, what's so hard about that? Just move the bytes. What's the problem? And you're actually not wrong. The challenges here are by no means technological. Instead, they're all socio-economical. Keep in mind, we're talking about the PTK here, the result of taking a bunch of data and basically throwing it into a blender. This is not the same thing as shifting a few letters from the start of a Wi-Fi password to the end. The nature of hash functions means that any small modification will cause the whole thing to change, not just a few bytes to move around. To make such a specific change to the PTK, we need full control over this whole process, something the vast majority of Wi-Fi systems do not give us. I mean, to be fair, why would they? They knew what security systems they wanted to support and how they worked. Why would that ever be a concern for any normal user? Because we're just not normal users. To people like us, a goofy movie? It's just a movie. Crazy Frog? It's just a normal frog. And we need control over that PTK, damn it. But if it isn't handled by the Wi-Fi firmware itself, then it's buried somewhere deep in your operating system's network stack. Even if you did manage to locate and patch the right code, you just know next week's forced update will change how it all works, forcing you to do it all over again. Sadly, this is reality on all mainstream operating systems. Well, except for one. Indeed, Linux is one of the few operating systems where we can change how the PTK is generated. In fact, in true Linux fashion, there are several options for what component does the WPA handshake. But the most common by far is WPA supplicant. With a website like this, you know it's gotta be good. With just these 4 lines of code, we can do exactly what the Gamepad does. But we're not done yet. Even with these changes, our devices will still be primed to reject each other on first sight. When Wi-Fi devices first communicate, they give each other a list of their capabilities so that they can decide which protocol is the most optimal one to use. Nintendo may have made the slightest possible obfuscation, but this technically does constitute a new and incompatible security standard, so they christen it with a new ID. Ordinarily, WPA supplicant would take one look at that and assume correctly that it can't connect to that. But since we've technically added support for Nintendo's obfuscation, we need to update the IDs that it supports as well. The irony is, while we're doing most of this so that the Wii U accepts us, we also have to make changes for Linux to accept the Wii U. And now, we're still not done. As I mentioned earlier, the Wii U only ever supported one gamepad, so fittingly it only allows whichever one is currently paired with it to connect. The pairing, or syncing in Nintendo speak, once again takes a page right out of the Wi-Fi standard. You may have seen routers with a button that says you can press it to connect devices. You may have seen a prompt asking you for a PIN instead of a password. Well, these are all part of a feature called Wi-Fi Protected Setup, or WPS. Basically, once upon a time, the Wi-Fi Alliance thought some people would be intimidated by the usual process of connecting to a Wi-Fi network. To address that, a system was designed where all you had to do was enter an 8-digit PIN number and the devices would find each other and authenticate. The PIN number provided just enough encryption that the router could safely send the correct password over to the device, and from there, everything could proceed as normal. Or so they thought. In reality, WPS was horrendously insecure, containing a significant design flaw that allowed a hacker to brute force the PIN, and therefore receive the password, in a matter of a few hours. Safe to say WPS pins are not recommended today, but if you really want to use them, there are ways to make them more secure. Like only enabling the PIN after the user presses a button, and only exposing the PIN for a short period of time. Hey, doesn't this sound awfully familiar? On the Wii U, the WPS encryption once again employs byte rotation and gives the protocol a new ID, but both of those are similarly trivial to implement, and once we do, we can pair our PC with the Wii U. From here onwards, it's all pretty standard stuff. We can get a local IP address using the same exact DHCP you see on nearly all networks today. And as soon as we do that, the Wii U will start sending us video and audio packets over UDP, the same protocol used for everything from VPNs to Minecraft servers. This may look like a lot of packets, but it's actually less data than it seems. Networking tends to be limited to fairly small units of data. Standard Ethernet tops out at only 1500 bytes at a time. And while the Wi-Fi standard allows for a little more, it tends to stick to 1500 anyway, just for compatibility reasons. Nintendo, meanwhile, chose a middle ground. Their data units max out at around 1800 bytes. But what that means is for every second of video and audio, there are hundreds or even thousands of packets that need to be processed and pieced together. Thankfully, Nintendo continued to use a lot of standard stuff for the rest of the Gamepad. The video is just an H.264 stream, same as you'd get watching a live stream off the internet. And the audio is just uncompressed PCM, same as an audio CD. Then they provide a small header on each packet to help piece them together. If we do that and then pass the data along to an H.264 decoder and the speakers,
Super Mario 3D World!
wow, that was easy. What about control? This is a controller after all. Well, that's similarly pretty straightforward. The Gamepad sends a status update 180 times per second, or for a 60 FPS game, 3 times per frame. This packet has everything from its buttons to its joystick, touchscreen, sensors, and even battery state. If we inject our own data instead, there we go, I'm controlling a Wii U from my PC. It's actually pretty surreal. So, we've kind of done it, haven't we? This is a recreation of the Wii U Gamepad. This is it. To go with the coffee theme of the Wii U's internal naming, I call it vanilla. Well, that was easy. What? Okay, so it's not quite as portable needing a whole Linux PC to use your Wii U, but it works, right? Okay, fine. I'll admit it, that was the easy part, and it was easy for one specific reason. I am not the first person to try recreating the Gamepad. Back in 2013, when the Wii U was still contemporary, a group called MemaHacks laid the groundwork figuring out how the majority of the Gamepad worked, forking WPA Supplicant, Wireshark, X264, and eventually culminating in 2 major projects, libDRC to connect a Gamepad to a PC, and DRC Sim to connect a PC to a Wii U. libDRC we can talk about in a future video, but DRC Sim's goal was pretty much exactly the same as ours. It was definitely more of a proof of concept. It's pretty complicated to get it running, and it only supports a handful of the Gamepad's features, but it does indeed prove that it's possible, again, assuming you're on a Linux PC. For various reasons, MemaHacks' efforts largely fizzled out in 2014, but the torch was picked up again in 2017 by another developer who went by Rolando Islas. Rolando's was a much more serious attempt. It was a lot more like a real program than MemaHacks' prototype. It has an actual UI, which is useful, but I'd be lying if I said this version was any easier to set up. The main difference is Rolando split the app into 2 parts, a server that handled the connection on a Linux PC, and a client that could run on whatever you wanted. The idea being if you wanted to use a phone or, God forbid, Windows, a Linux machine could be a middleman to make it all work. While I can certainly see the logic, in practice it was pretty inconvenient. No one wants to fuck around with a separate box every time they turn on their Wii U, and apparently Rolando was halfway through rewriting the server before the project stalled, which means you have to set up no less than 3 separate apps to get this working. The client written in Java, one half of the server written in Python, and the other half written in C++. It's a mess. The Java-based client has an okay touch-friendly interface, but it's still pretty clunky. Every time you set a button in the controller settings, it scrolls back up to the top, which is pretty annoying. One of the stranger decisions was that the server re-encodes the video feed from H.264 into a series of JPEGs. You can genuinely see the compression artifacts, and this definitely isn't running at 60 FPS. I don't get it, it's more bandwidth for a lower quality result, and it means phones can't take advantage of hardware-accelerated decoding. I don't want to disparage Rolando's work too much. I mean, it was clearly never finished, so it's not really fair to criticize it. But is it better than MemaHacks' prototype? Well, it's debatable. It was definitely the first time you could ever make a Wii U gamepad out of a phone, which is nice, but apart from that, it's, if anything, even harder to set up and produces a worse quality video feed. It's good enough for simple tasks like changing a couple of settings, but for a daily driver it leaves a lot to be desired. Sadly, those efforts too fizzled out in 2017, and that was the last time there was a serious push to re-implement the Wii U gamepad. So this was the landscape of Gamepad clones when I started. How does vanilla compare? Right off the bat, my top priority with vanilla was user-friendliness. On a Linux PC with compatible Wi-Fi hardware, it's pretty much just click and run. I built a simple UI with Qt, and after only a month had something working pretty well. Rather than have everything split over 3 different languages, I chose to write everything in C. I wanted something that was both really fast and really portable. I knew that my goal was to eventually port this to other platforms, some of which may be too old or too underpowered for the likes of Rust or Python, but just about all hardware from the last 30 years or so has had some kind of C compiler, so it felt like the smartest choice. My other goal was accuracy. I wanted this to be as close to a real gamepad as possible, considering we weren't using any of the original gamepad code. I mean, I guess you probably could emulate the gamepad's original firmware for maximum accuracy, but this would be a lot more work for not a lot more gain, and a lot more risk of getting sued for copyright infringement. But I at least wanted all of the original functionality intact. I got in touch with Wii U veteran Gary Oda-Nichts, and he helped me implement the gyroscope, which is used in a ton of games, as well as a huge chunk of the command protocol, which the gamepad and console use to share basic information with each other. Perhaps not the most exciting part of the gamepad, but means we can do important things like let users set the region, so no one has to deal with this shit ever again. DRC Sim hard-coded all of its responses and only had data for North American Wii U's, but Gary wrote a pretty comprehensive interpreter so we can have a lot more flexibility. I even managed to get the microphone implemented, which isn't used that much in games, but is good for blowing Toad, so you can do that now. Ironically, all of the core Wii U gamepad functionality was actually the easiest part of this whole project. Yes, I got a lot of help, but even the stuff I did figure out myself, like the microphone, didn't really take much time at all. Despite all of its features, the gamepad's overall design and execution are actually very simple and pretty straightforward to re-implement on off-the-shelf hardware. No, the hard part was everything else, making it optimized, making it user-friendly, making it run well on as many setups as possible. As is often the case, the hard part was not doing the thing, it was doing the thing well. Here's an example. While I firmly believed having a middleman Linux machine was a terrible user experience, there were some good reasons to adopt DRC Sim's split front-end and back-end approach. One, setting up the connection required root permissions, and it's generally not a good idea to have an entire graphical app run as root, so by splitting the connection code into a separate process, we can limit how much of vanilla runs with elevated permissions. However, unlike DRC Sim, the user doesn't have to know this is happening at all. Vanilla sets it up automatically, and the backend definitely doesn't re-encode the video into JPEGs. All it does is maintain the connection, and if the user really wants to, it can forward packets over a network. Arguably the best use case of this is not a wholly separate PC, but actually a Linux virtual machine that's been given direct access to a USB Wi-Fi adapter. Theoretically, it can forward packets to the host, allowing more closed OSs like Windows and macOS to be a gamepad. Probably not the most practical thing in the world, but it's an option if you desperately need some kind of gamepad. I also added a pretty useful recording feature to vanilla. This is probably the best way to capture the gamepad feed with original hardware. Historically, you'd have to install a hardware mod that captures the gamepad's LVDS feed just before it goes to the screen, but that's pretty complicated to install and a pretty extreme solution to the problem. With vanilla, not only do you not have to mod any hardware, it's also higher quality since it doesn't have to do any re-encoding at all. It can just dump the H.264 stream directly into an MP4 file. And since most games just duplicate the TV screen anyway, this kind of works as a poor man's Wii U capture. It's obviously limited to the gamepad's resolution of 480p, but if you're capturing an original Wii game, those maxed out at 480p anyway. As long as you can deal with the Wii U's admittedly heavy-handed compression, I actually think it's a pretty good option. Now, there are a few things that vanilla doesn't support yet. It doesn't support the webcam, it doesn't support the NFC reader or the IR emitter. That'll depend a lot on what platform it's running on. But I kind of figured not a lot of games use those things, so we can kind of cross those bridges later on. My bigger concern was vanilla was never going to succeed as a Linux desktop application. To make it a viable gamepad replacement, we needed to get it off the PC and onto something a little more portable. I decided to focus all of my efforts on supporting what I had to other platforms. And this was where the pain began. If you want to hear more about this project and get a sneak peek into what happened next, check out these member-exclusive bonus videos, including a whole segment that just ended up being too long to include in this video, and a series of development vlogs I made while working on the project. Links on screen and in the description. Of course, huge thanks to my current members for being here and really making these projects possible. I couldn't have done it without you. And finally, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.